wish to report that at Berkshire's Audit Committee meeting held on March 2nd, 2004, Deloitte & Touche responded to the 4 questions I suggested be asked to the independent accountants by all audit committees. And we're going to put these up in just a second. With respect to Berkshire, the questions and the auditor's responses will be shown on the following slides. And I might mention that I really do think these questions should be asked at all of all auditors, at least annually, perhaps even quarterly. And I really think that if such a procedure had been followed over the years, don't eat them all, Charlie. If such procedures had been followed over the years, there would have been a lot less trouble in corporate America. I mean, for many years, particularly in the 90s, I think there was a weakening, frankly, in auditor vigilance. And the trick, as I've said, is really to have the auditors more worried about the audit committee than they are worried about the management. And it's quite natural when they are essentially hired by the management and when they see the management regularly and they only see the audit committee infrequently that it's tempting to listen a little bit more to management than the audit committee. But these questions, if asked, in my view, and if the answers are put on the record, I think it would have a very helpful effect on behavior, because once on the record, it means the auditors, it means they're on the line. And I've been on a lot of boards of directors, and I've seen in retrospect things go by that
I think it was campaign spending.
Oh, campaign spending. Yeah, I have joined something that Jerry Kohlberg, this is personal, this has nothing to do with Berkshire, but that Jerry Kohlberg has spearheaded, and it's taken a position, and there are probably 30 or so, mostly business people, taken a position against soft money, and also taken a position on very fast disclosure of campaign finance money, because I personally think that the arms race in terms of campaign spending by businesses has just begun. I mean, it doubled in the last election, but political influence, and I don't mean that by buying a vote, but I mean just in terms of having a big ear in Washington or in other state capitals. Political influence has been an underpriced product in the past. I mean, the government is enormously important in this country to most companies. It was amazing how cheaply it could be, attention could be purchased, but the price is going up, and there will be an escalation. And I don't think it's easy, if you're the manager of a business and you own 0.1% of it, and you're in a business that's heavily affected by government, I don't think it's very easy to tell your board of directors that you're going to take a hands-off approach. So I think legislation is needed in that arena, and there are over 100 campaign finance reform bills that have been introduced. Everybody wants to have their name on a bill, they just don't want to have it passed. And John McCain's been working hard on it, and it's something I think we have to come to grips with, because it's going to be a battle of the wallets for influence. And like I say, if I were running some other company and my competitors were spending money to get the attention of would-be legislators or actual legislators, it'd be very difficult to take some high and mighty position that I wasn't going to do it myself, and my board and my shareholders might ask me why I was taking that position. We are lucky, basically, to be in a business that's relatively unaffected by legislation. Although
that you do not put your citizenship in a blind trust, but you also don't speak on behalf of your company. You do speak as a citizen if you speak, and therefore you have to be careful about when you do speak, because it's going to be assumed you're speaking on behalf of your company. Berkshire Hathaway certainly in 54 years has never and will never made a contribution to a presidential candidate. I don't think we've made a contribution to any political candidate, but I don't want to say for 54 years that we don't do it. Now, we operate in several regulated industries, and our railroad and our utility, as a practical matter, they have to have a presence in Washington and in the state legislatures in which they operate. So we have a few, I don't know how many, political action committees, which existed when we bought it. We bought the companies at subsidiaries, and I think that unquestionably they make some contributions simply to achieve the same access as their competitors. I mean, if the trucking industry is going to lobby, I'm sure the railroad industry is going to lobby. But the rule is, I mean, that people do not pursue their own political interests with your money here. We've had one or two managers over the years, for example, that would do some fundraising where they were fundraising from people who were suppliers to them or something of the sort. And if I ever find out about it, that ends promptly. But my position at Berkshire is not to be used to further my own political beliefs, but my own political beliefs can be expressed as a person, not as a representative of Berkshire, when a campaign is important. I try to minimize it, but it's no secret that in the last election, for example, I raised money. I won't give money to PACs. I accidentally did it one time. I didn't know it was a PAC, but I don't do it. But I've raised substantial sums. I don't like the way money is used in politics. I've written op-ed pieces for the New York Times in the past on the influence of money in politics. I spent some time with John McCain many years ago, before McCain-Feingold, and on ways to try to limit it, but the world has developed in a different way. On your question about I will just say I'm a card-carrying capitalist, but I believe we wouldn't be sitting here except for the market system and the rule of law and some things that are embodied in this country. So you don't have to worry about me changing in that manner, but I also think that capitalism does involve regulation. It involves taking care of people who are left behind, particularly when the country gets enormously prosperous. But beyond that, I have no Berkshire podium for pushing anything. Charlie?
Well, I think we're all in favor of some kind of a government social safety net in a country as prosperous as ours.
Democracy in action at Berkshire. The couple of questions that were raised in terms of material information or material risks in respect to Berkshire and specifically to our insurance operation, annually in the 10K, there's a recitation of risks. And in my own opinion, in terms of our insurance operation, this question does not pose material risk to Berkshire's insurance operations. The question, one gentleman toward the end mentioned the fact that it might even be more profitable for Berkshire in terms of what might happen if we followed the motion. Ironically, he could well be right if it were in our determination. But if you just take our three major states in electric utility operation, where we serve almost 2 million customers: Iowa,
Utah, and Oregon, but it's true of other states as well. We operate under the dictates of the utility commissions in those 3 states, all of which, or each of which, sets their own rules regarding operation, and each of which we end up obeying. If we were to unilaterally, for example, decide to close down significant coal generation, we would be told to depreciate those plants over a shorter period, and that would translate not into cost to Berkshire, it would translate into higher rates for electricity. We are entitled to a return on our investment, and the faster the depreciation, the higher the rates have to be in order to achieve allowed returns. So there was a woman from Oregon speaking, for example, and the burden of any unilateral attempt by us, and we couldn't do it without the approval of the utility commissions, but the burden would fall on customers. And it is true, actually, that we would recoup accelerated depreciation, and we would probably have a much larger investment on which we would be allowed to return in other generating facilities. But this is a question, this is not something that the stockholders of Berkshire end up incurring the cost of. It's something that the rate or the users of electricity in these various states will pay for, and that judgment, quite properly, should be made by the public utility commissions of those various states. And whatever they decide, we will follow. And over time, there's no question, just like we've talked about our wind generation in Iowa, this country will move toward a different composition of electricity generation. And as I stated earlier, I personally favor more nuclear over time, but that will be determined by both at the state level and in some extent, in some ways, at the national level. So it's our recommendation that the motion be voted down, and I think the motion is now ready to be acted upon. Good question. You may not be aware of the history of the issuance, but we issued the B shares. There were no, they're just a common share, so we renamed the old shares A shares. But we issued the B shares, whatever it was, 7 or 8 years ago, Charlie, something like that. And we did that in response to some people, particularly a fellow in Philadelphia, who we felt was going to induce people who really didn't understand Berkshire at all into a terribly expensive way of owning tiny pieces of Berkshire, probably sold on the basis of an historical record that we did not think was representative of what could be incurred in the future. In other words, we were disturbed by somebody who saw a chance to make a lot of money off of people who were really uninformed, using our stock as the vehicle, and we were going to reap the unhappiness of those people. Subsequently, they're going to run into tax problems and various administrative cost problems and so on. So to ward that off, and only to ward that off, we issued the B stock, which effectively put that fellow out of business because it was a better vehicle for doing what he was going to try and get people to do at great profit for himself. And when we issued it, it had not existed before, and we put 2 differences in it from the A stock. A, we wanted to create a lower value per share, so we did it on a 1/30th basis. At the time, it was around $1,100 or thereabouts, because the A was selling for in the low 30,000. But we put on the prospectus, which is a very unusual prospectus in other respects. We put on there we were going to differentiate the stock in only 2 ways, but we were going to differentiate it in those 2 ways. And one was the voting power, because we didn't want to issue the stock and we didn't want to change the voting situation much. And the second way was in terms of the designated charitable contributions, which the A was going to continue to enjoy, and the B would not participate in. And the reason the B wasn't going to participate in it is because the amounts would have gotten to a point that would have been an administrative nightmare. I mean, this year we designated $18 on the A shares. We've got a lot of one-share B holders, which would be 60 cents, and it just doesn't make any sense. And we saw that, so we just said if you buy the B shares, you're buying into an instrument which economically is equal to 1/30th of an A. In voting, it is not equal to 1/30th of an A because we don't want to change the voting that much. And it has a slight economic difference in terms of the fact it doesn't get to participate in the charitable contributions program, which is a very small item relative to the whole capitalization, but it's something. But we do not, you'll notice our A and B, compared to other companies that have different voting arrangements. I was just looking at one the other day where the premium for the voting stock is 10 or 12% or something like that relative to economic interest. That's because people assume that if the company's ever sold or anything like that, the guy that owns the A will get treated better than the B. And Charlie and I have been in a situation where we got somewhat taken because of a relationship like that. We will treat the B exactly as the A, except for those two things which at the time of issuance we set out as being differences. And those two items everybody saw coming into the picture, and they're going to stay. They will stay as part of the picture. Actually, in terms of when the meeting will be held 2 years from now, we aren't even going to vote by votes in a sense. I mean, I'm going to get a sense of what people want to do, but I regard, in that respect, I think that it ought to be the most convenient for the most people, not for the most number of shares. A will not vote any different than B or anything because, you're all individual people, and I want whatever works best for the most. But in terms of those two other items, they were set out that way, and they'll stay that way. If we'd set out a different, we would not change the relationship once of the two stocks. Once they were issued, we would not benefit one relative to the other. But those are the terms of the two. Charlie?
Yeah, we had to issue the B stock to frustrate the ambitions of this jerk promoter, and yet we didn't want to split the A stock down to all of it down to tiny little fractions, which would have frustrated him but forced us to have a stock split we didn't want. So we created a vehicle which had these two slight disadvantages, and that kept most of our capitalization in its traditional A stock and also frustrated the promoter. It's an historical quirk. It's an accident of life.
And the B is sold at a remarkably consistent relationship to the A. The discount got as low or as high, I should say, as I think it was over 4% for a small period of time. But it's generally speaking, the B is sold at parity to very slightly below parity, and indeed A shares get converted to B, and that would not happen unless the B were at parity. I think it's worked out pretty well. I mean, we backed into it, but I don't think anybody's been disadvantaged.